All right, so Unit 10 is animal reproductive behavior, specifically marine animal reproductive behavior. And we're going to hit a few topics. First, we are going to talk about some of the strategies that you might not be familiar with as far as terrestrial organisms go. And we're going to go over some specific vocabulary for this unit. And then we're going to go ahead and compare advantages and disadvantages of some of these reproductive strategies. And then eventually you guys are going to actually have to learn the complete life cycles of salmon, tuna, grouper, shrimp, oyster, and giant clam. I'm teaching this to you backwards from how the Cambridge Syllabus has it, simply because it's important for you guys to understand, I think, the strategies before you think about the life cycles, because you also have to evaluate the choice of habitat and some of their reproductive methods as part of this unit. So I think it's easier to understand if we do it this way. So if you're utilizing the quick notes, just understand that it's probably going to jump around in the quick notes to find what we are actually talking about, because I think the quick notes begin with just jump straight into an introduction of the life cycles. If you find that personally that's going to be more beneficial to you, go ahead and take a look at the life cycles ahead of time. But just it is mixed up for this unit. All right, so again, we are going to compare and contrast, or we're going to look at advantages and disadvantages of internal and external fertilization in marine organisms, and then also subsequent care of the offspring afterwards. So do they put energy into caring for the offspring after fertilization occurs or not? And the answer is there's a huge range of differences in the marine world for that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that. You can pause if you want to look at that. But the big overlying question when we're talking about animal physiology and animal behavior is, why do organisms do things the way that they do? And the answer is that you have to, every time you ask that question, you have to think about, what is the cost versus benefit ratio? And when we say that, we're talking about cost being the energy required or the energy input that is needed to achieve the task. And then the benefit of, is this going to get me food? Is this going to keep me from being eaten? And is this going to help me reproduce? Cost versus benefit ratio touches everything from animal behavior to the way things are shaped, so anatomy, to physiology. This can impact, specific to this unit, cost versus benefit ratio is going to come into play in choice of reproductive strategy, habitat that the adults live in versus habitat that the offspring exist in, and their parenting strategies in general. So the first concept we're going to talk about is external fertilization. So external fertilization is unique in the marine environment because gametes get released outside the body and they fuse outside of the body of the organisms. This is possible because of the three-dimensional and buoyant properties of water. So water is a three-dimensional space, and then it also has buoyant properties, negating gravity a little bit, so egg and sperm can actually get released in the water and float around instead of just gravity taking it straight down to the bottom. Why is this beneficial? One, because it allows them to explore external fertilization as a strategy, and two, it's helpful because, as you're going to see, some marine organisms, their fertilized eggs actually float up to the surface, and so when the organism hatches, the larvae is up at the surface of the water, and larval marine organisms are called zooplankton, and you guys also should remember that zooplankton feed on phytoplankton and other zooplankton. So by the nature of the eggs simply floating up to the surface, they are putting themselves in a position to have a plentiful food source, since we all know that phytoplankton exists at the surface layer of the water, right? So again, constantly thinking about that cost versus benefit ratio. Why is this happening the way it's happening? So back to external fertilization. this is a process where huge numbers, like hundreds of millions of eggs per year, hundreds of thousands in a single spawning event, are released at one time. And this is often synchronized between a population and synchronized between males and females especially, because cost versus benefit ratio says it doesn't make sense for oyster A to release all its eggs when oyster B is like, I wasn't ready. So it's a waste of energy to do that. So they a lot of times are coordinated by lunar cycles, by temperature. They can even be cued by other organisms releasing their egg or sperm. So like oysters in particular, when they can actually sense when an oyster sperm of the same species is nearby. There's a hormonal sense going on there, and they're like, oh, well, it's time, let's go, and they go ahead and spawn too. So by doing that, they ensure that they have a better chance of fertilization. So I'm just going to, we're not going to watch this whole video now, we will watch it later because this is a good video for aquaculture, but I want to get to one of the parts on here.
Units, the broodstock will begin to open natural habitat. At this point, hatching personnel do not know if an oyster is a male or female.
So internal fertilization is what we are more familiar with, and that is where the gametes fuse inside the body of the parent. This requires one specific anatomy, which again costs energy to make. So it requires an external male sex organ. It requires the male to transfer sperm directly into the reproductive tract of the female. So that costs energy because the male and the female actually have to physically find each other, and the ocean is a big place, we know that. We know that also certain populations of organisms live in smaller numbers than others, so it makes it difficult. You have to find somebody of the correct sex and of the appropriate age, which again makes it more difficult and in the long run costs more energy. The bonus to this is that the likelihood of egg and sperm actually meeting each other and fertilization success is significantly higher. So cost is high for finding a mate. Benefits are increased fertilization rate, or number of eggs fertilized. So there's not as much waste in unfertilized egg and sperm.